Since the recent silverfish series at Magiscroft, where we allowed bloodworm and joker, I've been receiving quite a lot of questions regarding leams and soils, what types of leams there are, how and why we use them, and what they actually do. I think this is an area where people can significantly overcomplicate what should be a fairly simple process. So in this short video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the different types of leam, the main types of leam that we use when we're fishing with bloodworm and joker. We're going to talk about what they do, what variations there are in the different types of within a type of leam, and I'll touch on that more in a minute, and then how we actually use them, how we mix them together, what quantities we use, etc. So the first sort of leam, and the most common leam that's used by anglers up and down the country when fishing with bloodworm and joker, is normal terre de somme, or light damp leam. It normally comes in two colours. Normally comes in a black or a natural colour, which is like a light clay colour. You can colour it if you've got natural ones. You can use bait dyes, powder dyes, or brick dye. But in my experience, what happens is, unless you do that significantly before you fish, it can wash off really quickly in the water, leaving you back to the normal light brown colour. And if you're fishing in very clear water with predators in it, where fish are a little bit wary about coming over a light coloured background, that can be an issue. So if you're going to fish those sort of waters, always opt for the dark leam. Okay, the light one comes into more into its own when you're trying to put a bigger cloud in the water to draw fish in, and we'll talk about that in a minute. There is quite a bit of variation between the different manufacturers of the leam. So the ones I've got here today, I've got Colmic Leam, the company I'm sponsored by, which is a very, very fine powder consistency to it. It's really forgiving, it binds really well, it's easy to use, and it's very difficult to make a mess of, which is always a bonus in my books. You've then got Census Leam, which is probably the most common and the most used one in the UK. It's a great leam, but it's slightly coarser than the Colmic one. It's a little bit more sandy and gritty. And the only thing you need to realise with that is it's good if you want a leam that will open up quicker, but you do need to, if you want it to bind down, you might need to add a bit more grey leam to it in order to lock it, and I'll talk about that later. And the Van den Eyne damp leam is somewhere in the middle of the two of them. Okay, if I was going to go out there and suggest to you to buy it, I would suggest getting a fine leam, a Colmic or a Powell's type leam, which is a Dutch manufacturer, or go for the Census one. The important thing, very much like when I did the video on ground bait, is getting to know the leams that you're using. Okay, once you get used to it, you can make it do a lot of things. All right, but you need to get used to the leams. As you can see, I have a selection because I know what I've used, a lot of them for a long time, and it's easier for me to pick up a bag of the stuff that I know is going to suit the water I'm going to fish. So what do we use leam for? Well, all leams and soils really are an additive, but it's really, the main reasons we use them is either to add weight to the ground bait to get it down to the bottom, to bulk it out and reduce the amount of feed content, i.e. you want to feed 8 balls of ground bait, but you don't want to put 8 balls worth of ground bait in. You can cut it 50-50 or 70-25 with leam, and you're putting the same volume in to create the same bed of feed on the bottom, but you're not putting as much food content in. And the other reasons really are to create a cloud to bring it in the water, and terre de somme is extremely good at putting a big cloud in the water, but really it's and as a carrier to get your bait to the bottom where the fish are, where you want to catch them. So that's terre de somme, and we'll talk a bit more about that when we talk about double leam mixes in a minute. The next type of leam is terre de fume, which is or terre de rivière. Most people know it as TDR, terre de rivière. And terre de rivière is, as it says on the thing, it's a river leam. It's a lot heavier than the light damp leam, than the normal humidified clay. But what it also is quite a bit coarser. But what it also is quite a bit coarser. And the reason for that is it's got a lot heavier than the light damp leam, than the normal humidified clay. But what it also is quite a bit coarser. And the reason for that is it's got a lot heavier than the light damp leam, than the normal humidified clay. But what it also is quite a bit we'll open a bag in a minute and have a closer look at it. I'll bring it up to the camera, but it's quite a coarse, grainy sort of a leam that has lots of bits and lumps in it. Okay, it's great for adding weight if you want to get the ball of ground bait or your feed down to the bottom really quickly. It's great in flowing water because when it goes down it will stay where it's put. It won't wash away as much as the normal terre de somme will. And the other thing that's a real bonus with it is as I mentioned before, terre de somme creates a big cloud in the water. Okay, terre de rivière, it creates a lot less cloud. Now why is that important? Well, you might think having a big cloud in the water is really great, and in lots of occasions it is. But what happens when you have a big cloud of leam in the water is that you attract lots of small fish. And in waters with lots of predators, my feeling is that it attracts predators into it. And you do tend to find that when you fish directly over the top of leams, if you're fishing for roach, the bigger roach tend to hang off it. And my feeling is that that's because they don't like getting in amongst lots and lots of small fish feeding, and two, if the big cloud's attracting predators, they can be a bit wary and back off it a bit. When I'm fishing for roach, I tend to prefer if in some venues you'll find that the roach won't come over leam, and you're better off fishing either TDR or soils, and we'll talk a bit more about topsoils later on. With terre de somme, you can add grey leam to it, and as I said before, a double leam mix, and that will reduce the amount of cloud that comes off it when you put it in. It locks it and gets it to the bottom without it. But once it opens up on the bottom, you still have terre de somme on the bottom, and as fish feed over it, it does create a cloud. And the pluses and bonuses to that: some days a few fish coming into your peg, pecking around balls of leam, creating a little cloud, can draw more fish in, and it's brilliant. On other days, when you're trying to catch your 4 to 6 ounce roach and they're backing away from it, it can be slightly less effective. The important thing is to understand the venues you're fishing, try them both, see what works best, and then test and adjust. Everything with ground bait and leams is about testing, adjusting things until you find out what's the right thing to use. The other two leams we use, I mentioned it earlier, grey leam. Loads of people do this, it's pretty much the same stuff. Grey leam is a binder, and its main use is for locking ground baits and leams together to get them down to the bottom before they break up, reducing the amount of cloud that comes off them and the amount of bait that escapes from the balls before it gets to where you want it. And the other thing is you can dust it over joker to create neat balls of joker to feed. It'll lock balls of joker together to get them to the bottom. So you're feeding neat joker, and we'll have a look at that in a minute when we have a look at some of the leams and doing a double leam mix. The final leam, it's not so common in UK, but it's used all over the continent, is a dry leam. This is basically a really dry version of terre de somme, but it's finer. And what that's brilliant for is it can change the consistency of ground baits and leams. You can use it to rescue mixes, although to be honest I've had limited success with doing that. Once you've messed it up, you've messed it up pretty much. But what it is very good at is separating out joker, and when you want to separate out joker, I'll talk about that later, but when you separate out joker, you want to do it with the minimum amount of adding the minimum amount of leam, so that when you add it to the ground bait, it's not changing your mix and the percentages of your mix. So we'll have a quick look at a couple of the things. I've got 3 buckets here to just show you a couple of things. The first one, and I'll open a bag up, I'll run it through a riddle, and then I'll bring it up to the camera. In fact, we'll come a little bit closer. Terre de somme. What we're going to do is we'll open up a bag of colmic terre de somme, and we're just going to put it. Now this is a squat riddle. Basically, it's like a sieve rather than a pinky riddle or a maggot riddle. And we'll just pour it on top. Be very Italian now and get my trusty glove out. And basically, if we just shake that, just shake it straight away without rubbing anything through, what you'll notice is that the majority, quite a lot of that leam's already gone straight through the riddle in there. The bit though, the important bit is, unlike with lots of things where you throw lumps of ground bait away, with Leam you want to push it all through, because the lumps are where lots of the moisture in the Leam is, and it saves you adding more later. So what we're going to do is we're just going to quickly lightly run our hands round the riddle like that, and you'll see everything's gone through, and what we're left with is a really nice mix. Basically it will squeeze and you can feed it just like that. Okay, it just locks together as a ball of Leam. The issue if you feed it like that is that it will create a big cloud in the water when it goes down, and that's, as I said, that's not always what we want. And in deep water it may break up before it gets to the bottom, releasing your joker or any food you put in it, and that will end up in a big wide area, which isn't what we want. So I've already got an open bag, so what we can do with that is we can add grey Leam to it, which I mentioned earlier. Now I get asked a lot about what quantities. Now I've been doing this a lot, and I know what Colmic Leam will take, and I know how much Leam to put in it, but pretty much 1-2 kilo bag of Colmic Leam, I normally add about 250 ml of Leam to it, of grey Leam, and I just dust it over the top. Now I know with Colmic Leam that's about right. For most of the stuff I do, if I want it to have more in it, to lock up more, I'll add more grey Leam to it, and I'll atomise it a bit more. Okay, when you're doing Leams, a drill is absolutely essential. Okay, and what you really want is a drill and an atomiser. Firstly, the drill. All we're going to do to start with is simply drill the ground bait mix. Okay. Now, what that does is you'll notice you can see the light grey Leam in it. It's made it a lot drier. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm now going to use the atomiser to damp that down. And what we're looking for is the Leam to start to come together and bobble and stick to the side of the bucket. And I'll show you when we get to about the right point, because it's difficult to show while I'm actually drilling it. So, atomiser. Right, can you see, instead of looking like a really fine Leam now, that's starting to look a little bit like topsoil. Okay, and that's the consistency you want. It still needs a bit more because it's still a little bit dry. So we'll put a tiny bit more in there. Okay, and hopefully you can see that it now looks like more like a topsoil. Now when you actually pull that out now and bind that together, you'll see that it's a much stiffer, nicer consistency to work with, to carry a thing. It feels a little bit tacky and a little bit sticky, but it still breaks down absolutely fine. As I say, the most important thing with Leams and Soils, and learning how much Leam to grey Leam to add to it, is to practice. And as I said with the ground baits in the ground bait video, pick one or two, use them and practice with them. The good thing about practicing mixing up Double Leam is it doesn't matter what you do with it. If you start out and you put a bag of brown Leam, black Leam in the bucket, and you add 250 ml of grey Leam to it and you mix it up and it comes to a consistency you're happy with, bag it up, seal it in a vacuum packed bag, chuck it in the garage. Okay, And then do another bag, but add more grey leam to it. And what you can do is take a ball of each and throw them in a bucket and see how long they take to break down. But you're not wasting it, because you just bag it in a sealed airtight bag and then put it away for later on. Okay, so that is basically, I'm not fishing for a few weeks. That could be 6 months I could leave that in the garage. There's no food in it, there's nothing that's going to go off, it's just soil. So, I talked a bit about separating joker and adding joker. A lot of people say to me, how much did you feed at the start? And I'll say, at Majescroft I fed 300 ml of joker at the start in 6 balls, so 50 ml in each ball. People say, well, I fed the same, but did you? That's the question. Depends what you're doing with your joker when you put it in. If you take neat joker out of a pack and you measure 600 ml and you put it straight into the Leam, you fed exactly 600 ml. If you've separated that joker first, depending what you've used to separate it and how much you've had to use, you might only be adding 400 ml or 500 ml of joker. So my recommendation when you're working out how much to feed is measure everything neat and then separate it before you add it to the ground bait if you need to separate it. Now when your joker's really fresh and you get it straight from the guy at the start of the competition, it doesn't matter, because if it's really fresh and it's really good joker, you can just put it in neat into your Leams and Soils and your ground bait, your balling mix, and you can mix it through with a drill or with your hands and you'll get a really good consistency. It will separate really easily. Where it's a bit more difficult, and I've got some to use today, is this joker's over, it's 10 days old, and to be honest with you, I've just got it out of the bucket that I used on the bank. And as we have a look at it, I'll try and bring it up. It's seen better days. It's not in good nick, okay? And when joker's like this, and it's started to go a little bit black and a little bit thing in place, this actually isn't too bad. It's not going to separate if you put it straight into the ground bait. What you'll end up with is lumps of joker throughout the mix, and you don't want that. You want your bait within the balls equally split. This is where that dry brown leam that I mentioned comes in, because if you use normal terre de somme to separate it, you have to add quite a lot and you have to keep mixing it and trying to do it. This stuff here, I'm going to separate this because it needs separated anyway, otherwise it's going to go off. But basically, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to dust over the top. Hope you can see that. Okay. Just going to dust a tiny bit of this very, very fine brown leam over the top like that. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to mix it through. Okay. And you'll see already the joker is starting to separate out. Okay, a bit more. As I say, this joker's not in very good nick at all, but as you manipulate it and move it around, it's starting to separate out. And the good thing with this really fine stuff is you can put it back through that sieve and you can sieve out any excess leam. Almost there. And you don't want to, you be a bit patient with this. What you don't want to be doing is adding more than you need to. There'll be bits, and it's really tempting to just stick a load more grey leam on it and hope that in the hope that you can quickly speed the process up. If I was fishing a competition and I had leam like this at the start, what I'd probably do is leave that to warm up a little bit and keep separating, and then come back to it and see if I need to leave any more. For the purpose of this, I'm just going to add a little bit more, a touch more, just to separate it out. Okay, as I say, there's a bit of dead in that, but I've seen worse. Now pretty much when it gets to the bottom, all this leam separates out, and the joker's going to lie there on top of the bed of leam anyway, or in amongst the balls, and as the fish peck at it, they'll pull them out. But as you can see now, that's all nicely separated. So when you actually add that, then measure that out and add it into here. Now if you've measured it first, you'll know you've got 600 mil there. So then when you know you've got 600 mil, if I measure that out now, I might have 700. But all you're going to do is you're going to add that into the ground bait mix and then mix it through. Okay, so it's important to understand how much you've put in, especially if you're in a team and you need to communicate with your teammates about how much you're putting in. Okay, there's nothing more frustrating as a team manager than to ask people what they fed, and they say, oh, I fed 600 mil at the start, and then I fed 4 lots of top up, which I know should have fed everything, and you look on the side tray and they've got half a kilo of joker left. Okay, so that's separating out the stuff. A bag of this will last you a whole season. It's an absolute bargain. So I would suggest you get that. I have not seen many types of it. Census do a white fooey blanc, but I just think it changes the consistency of the ground bait too much. I'd rather have something that's leam based to go into a leam when I'm mixing it in. So that's separating out joker. Okay. When I get to my when I'm measuring out balls to feed, what I normally do is I'll sit at the start and I'll work out how much I want to feed, and then what I'll do is I'll measure that out into a separate thing. So I'll measure, if I want to use 75% ground bait, 25% leam, and I want 6 balls, I'll basically take 6 handfuls of leam and 2 handfuls of ground bait into a separate bucket, mix it together, then I'll add the joker, and then I'll make the balls out to ball in at the start. And everything else that I'm left with I keep separate. So I'll have some neat double leam for topping up on my side tray, I'll have a bit of ground bait as well, and I'll have what's left of my joker on the side tray. So I can then test and adjust and make up balls at slightly different consistencies. I can feed neat leam with joker in, or if I think it needs a little bit of a boost to bring a few more fish into the peg, I might add a handful of ground bait into it, do a 50-50 ball, and put a small one in just to see if that extra sparkle from the ground bait attracts more fish into the peg. Again, it's not complicated fishing with bloodworm and joker. You just need to treat it as any other bait and actually just do what you do. Put a little bit in, see if it works. If it works, add a bit more. If not, you can step back a little bit, okay? You can't take out what you've put in though, so don't go wild. Terre de Riviere, I'll just open a bag because I just wanted to show you what the difference is between Terre de Riviere and Terre de Somme. This is the Colmic one, which is actually relatively fine, okay, as TDRs go. It weighs exactly the same as the Sensor stuff, but the particles in it, this is a pinky riddle, and if I give that a good shake, the majority of it goes straight through a pinky riddle, and the rest of it can be, well, just about barring a few lumps, can be manipulated through the thing. With TDR, Terre de Riviere, you must add water to it. You can't just use it straight out the bag. It's just too dry, it won't bind properly. It'll bind a little bit, but as soon as it hits the water, it'll break up. The Census one, as I say, because you can always add water to it. Jesus, that's French for you. Made the bags too strong for a little weakling like me. Okay, you'll notice with the Census one, it's a bit drier, but the particles in it are a lot bigger. Okay, so they need to be, you need a bit more work. That's a maggot riddle there. So there are a bit bigger particles in it. Again, if you're actually using Terre de Riviere, try and push the particles through. That's what adds the weight to the ground bait. So keep it all in. All they are is bits of leam that's just come together. Okay, there's a bit of humidity still in it. Okay. We'll probably cover Terre de Rivière another time in a bit more detail when we maybe do a river video. But at the moment, just to sum up, with Terre de Somme, big cloud, adds weight to your ground bait, but does have a cloud. Can reduce the cloud by adding grey leam, but once it's on the bottom and opens up, it's still Terre de Somme, and you will still get a cloud over it. Skimmers seem to love feeding over Terre de Somme. I don't know. I saw a video by Alan Scotthorne. I think he's got a point. I think they gill feed through it, and because it's so fine, I think they don't mind blowing it out through the gills, and the more cloud attracts more of them, as it does with most things with skimmers with coloured water. Roach, however, on lots of venues that I've fished, I find they back off it, and sometimes you're better off using soils rather than leams. So the last thing I just want to touch on then is soils. I get asked a lot, why can you not just use topsoil or molehill, even cheaper? Well, yes, you can. It doesn't have so much cloud effect. It takes a bit more effort to put it in, but I use soil quite a lot. Now, I buy my soil from a farm, or from use Verve from B&Q. But when I get a decent Verve bags of topsoil from garden centres vary a lot throughout the year from batch to batch. It's a bit like wallpaper. My recommendation is go in, open a bag. When you find a decent batch, buy about 5 or 6 bags of it, enough to last you the season. Get it home, riddle all the bits of fibre out of it, the stuff that floats. Put it in a bucket or a big garden waste sack and store it away and use it throughout the year. You can add grey leam to it, exactly the same as you can with soil, to bind it more, so you can use it like that. Molehills. There's loads of molehills near where I live, and some of them are very good and some aren't. The problem with molehill is that you don't know who's been there first. Up where my daughter lives, there's literally thousands of molehills, but every dog in the neighbourhood, and everybody walks their dog up there, pisses on every single molehill as they go past, and I'm not entirely sure that's a good thing. The other problem with molehill is that within 20 yards the soil, natural soil, can vary quite a lot. So if you're going to do molehill, you need to find somewhere where there aren't lots of dogs, it's not on a road verge where it's getting stuff off the road put onto it, salt from gritting vehicles and all the oil and stuff and petrol fumes and everything. So you want something away from a road and a verge where there's not lots of dogs and the farmer's not going to arrest you for nicking his land. If you do find a source of it, collect as much as you can from the same place and use it, because as I said before, consistency and understanding what your bait's doing is absolutely key to success in most of your fishing, not just when you're using bloodworm and joker. I hope that's been informative. If anybody's got any other questions or any other bits and pieces they want to know, please just drop me a message or comment below, and I'll try and cover those in another video. And tight lines, and hope to see you out on the bank sometime.